Hello everybody, and welcome to a special edition of Talk Show with RJ Sheedy. I'm your host, TV's RJ Sheedy. A special edition only means one thing. We have a very special guest today. Our guest today served as both a member of the Milford School Committee and a member of the Milford Board of Selectmen. He is now serving the town as our state representative, a role in which he is excelling at. Everyone, please say hello to Brian Murray. Brian, thank you so much for being here today and taking the time to stop by and chat with us.
Oh, thank you, RJ, for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. So like I said, you are our state representative now.
Yep.
How has this journey been so far? Is it a big change from your role on the Board of Selectmen?
I don't know if it's a big change content-wise. It's a big change in terms of the volume of things that get thrust before you. So you just have a large degree of requests from constituents, from advocacy groups. So the breadth of topics that comes at you rather quickly can be a little overwhelming. But I found it very interesting, and my background in the town of Milford has been a real big help.
Is there anything special that you're working on in the State House right now?
Well, right now we're trying to get some local bills through. One, to have the town be able to appoint special water commissioners, as the town is looking forward to buying the Milford Water Company. So I have special legislation pending, which hopefully, let me knock on wood a little bit, should get through the House in the next week or so. And I know that's very important for the town of Milford.
Yes. And one thing that people may not be aware of is that you also serve Hawkinton and Mendon. When does
I have Mendon.
In Hopedale.
Hopedale, and then I have Precinct 1 in Medway.
And you were just down in Hopedale with Karen Polito looking at their
Yes, the Lieutenant Governor came because Hopedale is very interested in doing some work in Hopedale Pond. And of course I was able to draw on the experience that we did at Milford Pond and Louisa Lake. So the background that I had through both of those projects I think could be very helpful for the town of Hopedale. And I've talked to the town administrator and I've talked to the selectmen just to kind of give them you know, some ideas, some jumping off points. And of course whatever they need me to do at the state level, I'll be glad to help out on that. It's a beautiful area. Is
Hopedale going to get a new traffic light soon? I've been hearing that story go around for a long time.
Well, I mean, that too, you know, they had applied for a grant from the state prior to myself getting elected, which was insufficient, or I guess didn't get accepted. So they've been meeting with the transportation people to renew that grant, and hopefully they'll have some success with it.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, Hopedale is a beautiful community. It's very small, and I see like a lot of growingness happening right there right now. They're getting a new Cumberland Farms across the street.
Right.
Across the other way, they're getting a new retail plaza. So they're really experiencing some kind of economic boom. And if their pond cleaning up could help the town, honestly, that's your job.
Yeah, the selectmen have been very proactive. The planning, zoning officials have been very proactive in terms of trying to rezone the area so that bringing in business would make sense and not negatively impact the residential character of the town.
Exactly. So one of the reasons why I invited you here today is because Milford is going to the polls on Tuesday to decide whether or not we should ban marijuana recreational retailers, testing facilities, and cultivators. Many members of the community expected to hear from you at the Citizens for Milford Forum, and unfortunately they rescinded your invitation to that forum. For my viewers who may not know why, can you explain to us what happened?
Yeah, I had gotten an email invitation, oh gosh, I can't remember, it might have been June or July, I'm not sure, from Jerry Edens of this Milford Cares group asking whether or not I would be a participant in the forum. And I said I'd be glad to do it. I could provide an overview of the marijuana statute and the process, because I think some people are a little perplexed as to why there needs to be a second vote where the town already voted on it in last November's election.
Can you explain real quickly as to why we're doing it? Because I'm pretty sure the ballot initiative that we voted on in November paved the way for communities to do this, right?
Right. So what happened was last November, the entire Commonwealth voted to legalize marijuana. That bylaw was drawn largely by the marijuana-backed industry and was heavily weighted towards the marijuana industry. Okay. At the state level, we got a lot of concern expressed to us from municipal groups, health groups, public safety groups about problems with the law. So the House went forward and incorporated a version of the law. The Senate went forward, did their version. We had a conference committee get together between representatives of the House and the Senate that hammered out the details and ultimately crafted the law that's on the books now that the governor signed. And what it states is, in terms of the prohibition, that if your community voted affirmatively for marijuana in the November 2016 election, which Milford did, then if your community subsequently wants to limit or prohibit marijuana facilities in your town, you have to have a town-wide ballot with the specific bylaw that the town would be looking to adopt to prohibit that activity.
Okay. Yes. So Jerry emailed you back in June and said, July, and said, would you be a part of this? And you said yes.
Yes. So I said that was fine. And then I received some emails from Harold Rhodes, who's another representative on the committee, saying that, you know, we really want you to be a strong advocate for the CARES group, and we want you to tell people that they should vote yes on this ballot question. And I responded in those emails to say that this is clearly a local issue. It's a state-crafted statute, which I voted for.
You voted for the revisions?
Oh, yes,
okay,
yes,
okay.
yes. In fact, one of the amendments that made it to the final statute was for the town-wide election. That was an amendment that I co-sponsored with some other representatives, and that's in there. The original version just had the Board of Selectmen taking action on it in this particular instance. So I basically said it's clearly a local issue. I'm here as an informational resource. I'll be glad to answer whatever questions people have in terms of the statute, the process, any other questions that you might have about marijuana I can access at the state level, but I'm a resource. I'm not here to advocate either for or against the question. And then I received emails from Donna Nero, and she basically said that unless you're prepared to come to our program, wear our CARES name tag, say that you're a strong advocate for CARES, and you're a strong advocate for a yes vote, we will get other speakers. I reiterated my emails to her saying, you know, to me, a forum, I think, is an open medium for full discussion. And my goal is to allow voters to be fully informed of the consequences of their decision so that they feel comfortable when they go to the ballot box. But I'm not an advocate for either side on a clear local question. And apparently that was not, you know, in theme with their event, and they told me I was not going to be on the agenda.
So if you were to be on the agenda, what would you have said to the people in that room?
Well, I think initially I would have focused on the marijuana statute itself, given folks a background of the statute, pretty much like we had talked about, explain the voting process, and also talked about the referendum question itself, which was drafted by the selectmen, and then I was prepared to answer whatever questions folks had.
And they weren't interested in showing that at their forum?
Yeah, I mean, they made clear to me that, you know, they're specifically focused on one aspect, you know, a yes vote. They were not interested in disseminating other information, and they would get other speakers who would do that. So I said, well, okay. I mean, to me, I think people ought to have clear, objective information so that they can make a decision as opposed to me telling them what their decision ought to be. I don't feel comfortable doing that.
Okay, I agree. So do you think the ballot question as it's written is at all confusing because community members of the town saw two different versions of this get put forth to them? Can you explain why two different versions were put out?
I can and I can't, because that happened at the selectmen's level. I can tell you that the initial question that was put forward was disseminated, perhaps a little early because it was prior to the final marijuana statute being signed by the governor. Once the governor signed the final marijuana statute, it says clearly that if you're going to have a referendum, you need to put the language of the specific zoning bylaw that you intend to adopt at your town meeting, which the initial question did not have. Okay? So then it went back to the selectmen. This is what I can't tell you because I'm no longer on the board. At some point in that process, the substance of the ballot changed to go from just retail prohibition to also the manufacturing, cultivation, and testing, which is on the current referendum question right now.
And there are currently 2 medical businesses that are focused on the testing aspect and the cultivating aspect. I understand that you had the opportunity to go visit Pro Verde and tour their facility. Did they tell you anything about what may happen to them if a yes vote happens?
Yeah, I mean, Milford is really fortunate, and I remember when both of those businesses came forward to the Board of Selectmen for the initial levels of support, which I was happy to, support. They made very good presentations in terms of their operations, but then, of course, I lost track of the businesses and didn't know. But Sage Naturals is a cultivator. They employ over 50 people. The jobs range from $13 hourly upwards of over $150,000 a year.
Those are good paying jobs.
They're very good paying jobs. It is a highly sophisticated, technical, and secure, and I would call it a laboratory, but it's a growth facility. So the air is carefully monitored in terms of the moisture and humidity. The lighting, obviously, is very monitored. The feeding of the plants is very monitored. Every seed is bar-coded, and it's a highly secure installation so that employees can't access product and do anything like that. It's really state-of-the-art. So people were asking me questions about these businesses. I didn't feel comfortable with the level of information that I had about these businesses, so that's why I approached them to see the facilities, to find out what their job plan is, and then I could better communicate to people the kinds of businesses that we have. Now, Pro Verde, as you said, is a testing facility, and again, it's state-of-the-art. The president of that, Chris Hudala, worked very closely with the Commonwealth Department of Public Health in developing the initial testing standards that we now use on medical marijuana. And again, highly technical, a laboratory. They test product for heavy metals. They test product for pesticides. They test products for dosage. And every product that gets generated, either at growth and then again at manufacture, has to be tested and then certified for these different purities. So Pro Verde has about 14 or 15 employees. Again, high-end wages, mid-50s to well over $150,000 per year. Very clean operation. Obviously, these facilities are operating seamlessly and quietly without interference with the town, and these businesses would be negatively impacted if the ballot question if the ballot question as written is enacted.
Is there a possibility for the ballot question as written to be enacted in a different form? Because doesn't this have to go to town meeting after the vote if it's voted on a no vote?
Yes. That's a big legal question, which even as an attorney, I see the issues. I don't know what the answer is. I've discussed it with various attorneys. There's a school of thought that says you might be able to amend it or change it at town meeting. There's a second school of thought that says the marijuana statute specifically says that if you are going to have a prohibition or a prohibition or elimination of those facilities, you have to have the bylaw that's going to be proposed voted on. So now you're talking about a scenario, say, where you have a vote on a specific bylaw, but then you're going to go to town meeting and say, well, I know we voted on that bylaw, but we really want to present this bylaw. That's going to be tough, and the issue, the issue with these businesses is, because some people said, well, they're grandfathered, they're here, they're doing business, they can continue to do business.
But only for the medical aspect of their side, correct?
Exactly. So yes, they can be grandfathered to do medical work, but I think what's envisioned, once this law kicks in the next year or so, the medical market is going to shrink and the retail market is going to increase. So if these businesses are only limited to the medical market, the reality is they're going to be priced out of the business. So they're going to be forced to either close or more probably relocate. So that's the danger that these businesses face, and it's an open question as to whether or not there could be some town meeting. But when you look at that marijuana statute, I think it's pretty clear that what gets voted on needs to be put forward at town meeting. And then, of course, even if you don't, let's just say legally you could do that, well, then you have the political question. I'm sure there are going to be town meeting members that might say, well, wait a minute, we had an election, we had a specific ballot, and now you're asking us to pass something that the voters didn't vote on? So it's a huge problem. And for companies like ProVerde and Sage, which have invested millions, Sage, just their HVAC system alone to regulate the air intake was well over $1 million in their building. So companies that have invested millions of dollars, that's a real problem. Now, it's all inside a building. It's all, what Sage did was if you envision this as a shell of a building, they built an inner building inside that shell, which can easily be relocated.
Okay. And the way they're built now, I don't remember, I think it was like at planning board somebody said this, the way they're built now, they're built to go off into recreational if they are allowed to.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, in fact, they're planning on that. In fact, Sage is looking to quadruple its size. They're envisioning that retail market really climbing. The estimation from the Department of Revenue on based upon what's happened in Colorado and Washington is once the phase-in period happens, they're envisioning revenue for the marijuana industry in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to be somewhere between $700 million and $1.4 billion. So this is a big money industry, and to have companies like that, I think is very fortunate for the town of Milford. So that's something that people need to realize about this ballot question. So there can be good reasons, certainly, to keep retail business out of your town. You can obviously feel very comfortable that that might not be the character of business that you want to have in your community. And if that's your choice, that's perfectly acceptable. That's a great reason to do that. But I think people need to be aware and fully informed of what the full consequences of the vote can be so that they can make a responsible decision.
I do want to ask you about what the specific consequences.
Can I drink this water?
Yeah.
Is this yours? Okay.
No, that's yours. Go for it.
All right,
Go for it. Before I talk to you about the specific consequences of voting either way, I do want to talk about the retail aspect of it, though. As a lifelong Milfordian, do you see retail shops impacting our public health, safety, and integrity of the town?
I think the selectmen, and it started when I was still on the board, I think the selectmen were very proactive on this by setting up a zoning plan for it, that these shops can only be in the industrial districts.
Right, we don't want them downtown, we don't want them next to schools or anything.
Right,
yeah.
right, so that was the intent on that. So I think in terms of placement, that was a very good plan going forward, which continues to exist. The statute allows, in addition to the high regulations required by the state, it's overseen by this Cannabis Control Commission, which is going to issue regulations. In addition to those regulations, localities, local communities can regulate these businesses as well. They can't regulate them more than they would, say, a package store. But in terms of regulations, localities can do that as well. So I think, the protections are there in terms of public safety. I think the question really boils down to one of choice. If, in fact, you don't believe that a marijuana retail is in theme with the character of your community, then you ought to vote yes.
Do you see any benefits from having a business like this in town?
Well, and this...
Because I've heard people tell me that
yeah.
It won't make any money. There's an overhead to hire extra police and ambulances and stuff like that to basically deal with any negative effects that this could bring. Do you envision that?
Well, and again, and the reason why I'm hesitating is because of the complexity of the referendum question. Okay, so I think the retail question gets handled on its own merit, but the testing, cultivation, and manufacturing is a whole different animal. I think by combining those in the same question has been a huge problem.
Right. It's really confusing to voters.
It's very confusing to voters, and it creates a situation trying to deal with these issues. I think the issues that you're talking about certainly may exist at the retail level, but I don't see them at the testing, cultivation, and manufacture
Before
level.
this election was even happening, I didn't know these businesses were even located in Milford. They just quietly do what they need to, and they follow their regulations and follow the rules, and
Absolutely.
nobody bugs them.
And they're models in the industry, by the way. Yeah, so that's why it's such a difficult question, and that's why I've told people that there are some real consequences to this. So while at the same time you might not feel that retail markets are within the character of your community, you have to understand that your vote could also adversely affect these very good businesses. So it's a very difficult ballot question to deal with. But, you know, I did have that question presented to me in terms of extra police and security and all of that. And we sought out some information from the state and also, you know, the local police chief. The Milford chief doesn't foresee any need for additional police officers.
Tom O'Loughlin sees no need.
I'd asked the chief myself because people were asking me that question. He doesn't envision the need for any additional police officers, you know, in terms of a retail operation. I'm sorry, you focused on what, security and public health as well.
Correct.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, you know, public health, you know, marijuana is legalized now. Whether you like that or not, that's what happened last year, okay? That's the will of the Commonwealth. That's the law of the land.
Exactly. I need to deal with Trump, and I don't like it, so.
Yeah. So now the question is, what do you do with that? Well, the statute that we passed in Boston, I think, highly regulates that product so that now if you're going to use that product, you know that it's safe because regulations have been put forth saying what it's got to be tested for, and if it doesn't pass those regulations, it's not going to the open market. You can buy it from your dealer in the back alley, but you know there were instances throughout the Commonwealth where marijuana has been laced with fentanyl and other dangerous drugs. You know, so that's a risk that you have. So by regulating it, you can really monitor the public health exposure. And I should say that the revenue that comes in from the state, in addition to local revenue, which is something that we haven't really even touched on, but the state revenue that comes in is initially targeted to administration of the program.
Is that the 10.25 that goes to the commission?
Well, there's
How does the tax breakdown work for it?
Okay, there's the regular sales tax, which is the 6.75, or maybe it's 6.25, I don't know. And then there's the excise tax, which is the 10.25. So say roughly, you know, 6 or 7% is your sales tax, roughly 10 or 11% is your excise tax. That's money that goes to the state, okay? And that money initially would go for the implementation of the program, but then the second tier of the dispersal of that money is for public health, substance abuse prevention, substance abuse education, substance abuse treatment through grant programs. Presumably communities can apply for grants or whatever. Those are regulations that'll be established. After that, it goes, there's a tier level and it goes to public safety and other, you know, task force. So revenue that's derived from that is intended to be filtered back to handle some of those public health issues. Now, in addition to those taxes we've talked about, there's a local tax, which can be up to 3%, and also a host agreement.
Now, this is the thing that I haven't heard many people discuss.
Yes,
So explain to me the host agreement.
So a marijuana facility or a marijuana establishment, I forget exactly what the term is in the statute, shall execute a host agreement with the community that it's in. And that fee can be up to 3%, and it's based upon the impact that it might have on the community. So let's just say, for example, the police, there has to be additional police, or there has to be whatever the impact might be. That host agreement would capture that. And I don't know if you saw, but the town of Holliston just signed 3 host agreements with marijuana establishments, and I forget what the revenue numbers looked like, but it could be well over, I don't know, $200,000–300,000 a year. So that's part of the revenue aspect that, again, you know, you might be totally against marijuana and not want that in your town, and that's fine, but I think people ought to understand what this process is, what the statute is, and what a yes vote means and what a no vote means.
So what are the effects of a yes vote and a no vote? I told you we'd get back to that.
Yeah, the yes vote would provide authorization for the town meeting to proceed to adopt the zoning bylaw, which would prohibit retail facilities, testing facilities, manufacturing, and cultivation. That's what the yes vote would do.
Okay.
The no vote would simply end it. The town meeting would not be able to proceed on a no vote.
So no vote means they're here to stay.
Well, no vote means, I mean, I suppose you could have another election next year or something. You could always do that. But the no vote would mean that there would be no prohibition, and you know, facilities could apply for licenses.
And even when they apply to licenses, they got to go talk to the Board of Selectmen, and they'll tell them what they need and everything else. So it's way more than just this
Absolutely,
vote
yeah.
happens
It's not
and
like
people come and set up shop.
Exactly, exactly. There's a process local. Okay, there's all local levels that they have to apply to, but more significantly at the state. There's a stringent set of licensing and regulation that's going to be put in place so that not just anybody can open up these places. They have to meet a litany of standards.
Now, we're almost out of time today. What are your final messages to the Milford community as they head to the polls to vote on this issue?
Learn as much as you can about what this question does and doesn't do. I didn't know enough about what the businesses here are, Sage and Proverty, so I went there. I learned about the businesses. People, I think, when they vote, they want to be informed. That's the role of the public official. That's our job, to make sure that people have the correct information, the level of information that makes them comfortable with their vote. I'm more than happy to answer whatever questions people ask. I've had people contact me with questions. I don't know all the answers. I have the marijuana committee at the State House, which was able to provide me some information, and I disseminated that out to folks who have asked. You know, whatever your preference is, whatever your opinion is, that's wonderful. The statute was intended to stimulate public debate. It's gratifying to see so many people starting to take an interest in this, either for it or against it. That's what was intended. And I'm here, and I think all of our town officials are here to provide information so that people can make a good, informed vote.
Well, thank you so much for coming here and providing us information on this vote. Thank you so much, Brian. And thank you again at home for watching today. I hope you learned something new from this conversation we both had. Again, Election Day is on Tuesday, September 19th. Polls are open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. That's all the time we have for us today. So long, everybody.
Do you like Talk Show? Like Talk Show on Facebook and follow RJ on Twitter and Instagram. Just follow him. He made us do it too.